Hello. This is going to be an experiment because I just lost all my speaker's notes somewhere out there. So it's kind of amazing, right? Hi, my name is Sanjayan. I'll go to basics. I'll start with my name. My name is Sanjayan. I am the CEO for Conservation International. I've been the CEO for 78 days. Losing my speaker notes is still not a fireable offense, so I'm still going to have my job after tonight, so all is going to be well. We are here to have a wonderful conversation today about oceans, about conservation, about UC Santa Cruz, and to honor a very, very special individual, Dr. Sylvia Earle, and have a conversation with her and with Julie Packard. So I was born a stone throw away from the Indian Ocean. I was born in Sri Lanka. And when I was born, as custom in my island, my family took me to an astrologer who reads the hair patterns on your head as a baby rather than your palm. And they delivered the message to my grandmother, who was the matriarch of the family, that I would die by drowning. So I picked UC Santa Cruz. So my mother and my family kept me out of the ocean. They kept me out of water. They didn't even let me take a bath. They poured water on my head until I was about 8 years old, when we had moved to Africa, and my mother broke with custom, which was a big deal for her, because she's not a particularly good swimmer. But she broke with custom and taught me how to swim. And it completely changed the trajectory of my life. It's allowed me to explore virtually every ocean on the planet, in the company of some of you who are sitting in this room. Now, I tell you that story for one simple reason, because in some ways it mirrors what's going on with the environmental movement today. The death of the planet has been foretold. What we do about it now is really what matters. And the individual we're here to honor and have a conversation with has not only told us about what's going to happen to our planet and to our oceans, but has also consistently urged us to do something about it, not to accept the status quo, to be a game changer and a change maker, not to believe in the astrology, but to make our own fate. Now, if I asked any of you if you know your kid was going to die by drowning, would you want to teach them how to swim? I bet the answer would be universally yes. Give the kid a fighting chance. So why do we treat our planet in any different way? All right. So this is the way this is going to go. I'm going to invite our two guests up here. We're going to have a short conversation, maybe 30 minutes, open it up for Q&A, and then we'll go on to the main event, which is the award itself, that the Chancellor George Blumenthal, who's here, will present. Now, as I said, I lost my notes, so I made this up with a little bit of help from Sylvia's team. But let me introduce to you Sylvia Earle. I've known Sylvia for a long time. She's a hero of mine, but that's no surprise. She's a hero of all of you here in this room as well. The things that came to the top of our minds as we tried to come up with her bio, which is extensive. She was the chief scientist for NOAA, the first woman to hold that position. She's an ocean elder, which sounds very grand, but a founder of that Ocean Elders group. Her own organization, Mission Blue, as well as being the founder of, it's called DOER, D-O-E-R, which is stands for Deep Ocean Exploration and Research, focus on submersible, focus on deep sea underwater research. She went to school at Duke University. I bet you if she had to do it all over again, she might pick Santa Cruz. She is in Santa Cruz, look, it's one of the few universities that has an invertebrate as its mascot. And anyone who cares about the oceans. And then Sylvia would have spent her time changing it to a sea slug, right? So she's in the Diving Hall of Fame. I distinctly remember this. It's 40 atmospheres, which I think works out to something like 1,400 feet or so, and held the record for a very, very long time in terms of that. She spent over a month underwater as an aquanaut, which I'm sure she'll talk about. She's published over 13 books, and most recently, she's on the cover of Time magazine. Like this week, Time magazine. So she really is a change maker, a world changer. I'm really deeply honored to invite Sylvia Earle to join me on stage here.
Thank you.
What happened?
Huh?
Middle seat there, if you could.
All right.
I'm getting lots of coaching. Again, I've lost my notes. All right. The second person I want to invite on stage has been a personal friend and hero and colleague of mine for basically my entire sort of career as a scientist and conservationist. She's someone who went to school at UC Santa Cruz for her graduate studies. Julie Packard is well known to all of you. She's a trustee, of course, of the Packard Foundation. She's the executive director of the Monterey Bay Aquarium and spends her time thinking about the Monterey Bay Research Institute, about the big initiatives in California, like getting rid of plastic bags, like what's going to happen to climate change, and constantly being a real voice, bringing science, articulating it, educating the public, and trying to always move the needle forward. She's been a board member of many conservation organizations. I got to know her when I used to work for the Nature Conservancy, where she was a long-time trustee of Santa Cruz. Of the Nature Conservancy. So UC alumni, Julie Packard, could you please join me on stage? Now here's something that unites the two of them. There's lots of things that unite the two of them, but one thing that does is that they both studied these transformative creatures that one thinks about when they think about conservation, and particularly oceans. Now you're thinking sharks maybe, seals, manta rays, whales. It's got to be whales. They both studied algae.
Yeah.
One studied red algae and one studied blue algae. And I studied pocket gophers. Sorry, brown algae.
Brown algae.
Brown algae.
We study all of those lovely
Blue
red,
algae,
brown,
that's
green.
not even a thing.
Isn't it? Blue algae? It should be a thing.
Blue-green.
Did I say blue-green? Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, since I don't have questions, again, because they've been somewhere, someone has my questions. Someone has amazing notes. I'm just going to stop.
Make something up.
I'm going to make something up. So Sylvia, you've been a change maker. You've been always pushing the boundaries. So one question that I know is on many people's minds, particularly young people who are getting into the field today, either scientists or conservationists. As a woman, tell me a little bit about the barriers, and did you ever manage to turn that into a strength?
Well, I had two brothers. I had to try to keep up with them. I mean, they could climb trees, so I could climb trees, right?
Right.
Sometimes there's a kind of reverse, call it discrimination, if you will. When I had a chance to spend a couple of weeks living underwater in 1970, the Tektite project. They did not expect women to apply, but some of us did. There were no women astronauts at the time. Footprints on the moon are all made by men. But there are quite a few women who aspired to be astronauts, they just weren't allowed to be. And when the notice about living underwater to be an aquanaut, during that era of space exploration, they just didn't bother to say that women need not apply, but some of us did. And then it was up to the person who was reviewing, the head of the program, science program, Jim Miller. He had to decide, and legend has it that he said, well, half the fish are female. I guess we could put up with a few women. And they did, but they wouldn't allow us to be integrated as part of the other teams. There are 10 teams in all. The idea, I mean, really, these were the words, there could be hanky-panky on the reef. So they had a women's team. They got in fact, they had to actually find an engineer who was not yet a diver. Easier to train an engineer to be a diver than to train a diver to be an engineer on short notice. And so they put together this team, and I got to be the head of the team. But where we called Aquanauts? No, we were the Aqua Bells, the Aqua Babes, the Aqua Chicks. And the one I loved the most was Aqua Naughties. And we did not care what they called us, just so we could go. And we had to pass muster by submitting a project that we wanted to do. And I naturally didn't think about the gender thing at the time and decided that, well, there are 3 ichthyologists, fish guys. We teamed up. I was the botanist, and we wanted to work together as ecologists. But I had to do it all myself because they wouldn't let me work with my proposed teammates, but they did accept the project that I had submitted, which was good news. So the rest, that was the time when I crossed the line. As a scientist, I was at Harvard. I had just, right in the middle of all that, he moved to California. The reason I didn't become an undergraduate at UC Santa Cruz is I don't think UC Santa Cruz existed.
At the time.
I wanted to be, anyway, that's another story.
But you know, so can I? So you just said something kind of remarkable. You said, well, we didn't care. When was it that you recognized that what you were doing was actually, you know, not just transformative, but all these other people were rooting for you because of who you were?
I'm not sure that's ever happened.
Cover of Time is pretty good.
Well, it's about the ocean. I mean, yes, that's the reverse discrimination thing. I mean, there are a lot of really great scientist guys who don't get on the cover of Time magazine. So, you know, it's putting a spotlight on those who are exceptional by being of a certain gender, doing certain things, and
okay.
You get noticed. Actually, my first experience where that was truly notable was in 1964, I suppose, when I was already a botanist in the making. I hadn't yet acquired my PhD, but I was a student at Duke, and again, there was this opportunity. They wanted a botanist to go to sea for 6 weeks in Indian Ocean.
Right.
Your backyard.
Yes.
And I hadn't been west of the Mississippi at that time. I'm a Jersey girl. And I had had a chance because they needed somebody who worked with seaweeds. And they, for the first time, were using diving equipment, scuba, to explore. And the whole mission, the National Science Foundation sponsored International Indian Ocean Expedition. It was only after I had said yes and got the teams together that somebody noticed she would be the only woman with 70 men on this expedition to the Indian Ocean. And all of a sudden, everybody got really nervous, and calls went back and forth. And so I sometimes ask guys, you know, if you had a chance to go to sea for 6 weeks with 70 women, would this be a problem? He's laughing.
Listen, I'm not allowed to say anything.
Yeah, that was very good. Anyway, I did, and I got this was a breakthrough for me with the press. I'd never engaged the press before. I didn't have to. I was a scientist. You don't speak to the press, after all. Even if you had a chance to, if you had a chance, you'd say no. It was just the way things kind of were. Scientists, you know, you speak to other scientists. If you write for the science journals, and if you cross the line, you become a popularizer, you know?
Yeah.
Death as a scientist. Nobody takes you seriously anymore. So, I was interviewed by the Mombasa Daily Times.
Right.
And the headline came out the next day. All of the scientists, there were 12 scientists with all the crew and other guys. Sylvia sails away with 70 men. That was the headline. Subtitle, but she expects no problems. What problems? Anyway, The real problem was exploring the ocean from the deck of the ship.
Of course.
And, you know, here you are up on the top, and here's the ocean. The average depth, 2.5 miles. Maximum 7 miles. And you're up on the surface in a little ship. So we had things that we dropped down into the ocean and take a bite of the bottom, like 12,000 feet down. You'd pull up a little ball of mud, and everybody pounced on that little ball of mud like treasures. I mean, they do if you go to the moon. These little rocks you bring back from the moon. This was like going to the moon, except it's this part of the solar system. It's our own home here, anyway. And
so I want to come back to research and ocean exploration in particular, but I want to see if Julie has a particular take on this, having gone to Santa Cruz, which has this particular focus on diversity and diversity in science, and now running the Monterey Bay Aquarium. How do you think about
since its very beginning?
Since its very beginning, that's right. Actually, that's very true. How do you think about diversity in science and diversity in ocean conservation?
I want to start by saying that Sylvia's been making out like that, she became a big deal because she's a woman. She's a big deal because
she's a big
of
deal.
who she is. So let's make no mistake about that. And, it's really, she mentioned how once you start popularizing science, you get no credibility and people give you a hard time, but she's had such a huge impact, and it took a lot of bravery to make those steps and take that flack and be able to put yourself out there. And for that, I mean, that's your biggest contribution that spurred so many of us on, because we need more ocean spokespeople. We need more people that can speak in a passionate, genuine way about what's going on and what we can do about it. So as for my life trajectory, which is not nearly as exciting as Sylvia's, I mean, I grew up like 2 miles from here. Back when it was not Silicon Valley, that word didn't exist. It was apricot orchards.
The slugs were here.
Never mind that. That's true, the slugs were here. But I agreed to attend this event, obviously to honor Sylvia, which is a fabulous honor to get to participate in, but also because I love where I went to university. And UC Santa Cruz was such a great place. I actually went there as an undergraduate and then went on through to get my master's. And I remember my advisor, he really wanted me to go to Duke, actually, and get my PhD, and he was really on my case. He was like, you've got to get out of here, Julie. You've got a lot of, potential. You should get your PhD. And I'm like, are you kidding? This is paradise. Why would I leave? And I kept working on research grants and TAing classes, and I was doing field work and diving and being out at the intertidal and collecting algae, and, I'm like, great, I'll get my master's, continue on. But it was and remains, although it's bigger now, just such an amazing place for undergraduate science education. I mean, nothing could be better. And whenever I'm asked to speak at a UCSE event, especially here at Rosewood, I can't help but mention that I did turn down Stanford for UC Santa Cruz. My mother cried, literally, on the phone. I was in boarding school in Massachusetts. She cried, but her comment was, they don't have a med school, and they didn't have an engineering school at the time, or law school, and she's like, where are you going to meet a good man?
That's a sign of the times.
Sign of the times. And it is true, like my boyfriends were, mainly draft dodgers. I mean, draft dodgers, smart draft dodgers with a lot of potential. We kind of had to drop below the radar for a while in those times. Yeah, I mean, the opportunity to work in a lab and, as an undergraduate and do field work is very unique. I mean, you just do not get that experience at a big university. And the focus on undergraduate education, which was a hallmark of the campus and remains a hallmark, was incredible. It was fantastic. I mean, nowhere else I was offered a job by my professor, I don't know, after my freshman year. I remember telling my dad, he had lined a summer job for me at HP, because I was the youngest in the family. I have 2 sisters and a brother, and I was his last hope to get involved with the company. And I remember telling him on the phone, he'd arranged a job doing, I don't know what, because, what could a freshman biologist do except, pack boxes or something, but anyway. And I remember telling him, Dad, I got a job, I'm staying here in Santa Cruz, and I'm doing some really interesting research, and he just, shook his head like, oh, he was crushed. Not because it was a bad opportunity, but because I was his last hope. Anyway, of course, studying science and doing research is wonderful, but really what my passion, and I'm sure many of those in the room share the same passion, my passion was and remains to communicate with the public and to do something about the environment,
right.
And not just study it. And to make that link between science, and of course there's so much science that we still need to do and so much knowledge that still needs to be gained about the ocean, that vast unknown realm, to share that with the public and with people who just think of it as something
Julie,
unknown.
did you ever struggle with that? Because my training was in science as well, and all 3 of us, obviously to much greater degrees on the 2 of you, have translated that science into action and being very vocal in asking people to do things and demanding people to do things, government, industry, private citizens. Did you ever find that to be an uncomfortable place, even now with the hat you wear as an executive director of an institution like the aquarium?
Actually not, because the Monterey Bay Aquarium was actually created for that purpose. We were created from scratch. The family's idea was admittedly more about science education, sort of, a place where people could learn about Monterey Bay and, yes, become stewards. We had kind of a smaller vision, but the thing is, over the decades, we all realize the ocean is changing, and even beautiful places like Monterey Bay that appear fairly pristine, there is no pristine part of the ocean.
Right. Yeah,
and so I've always been comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But again, I didn't even finish my PhD. I was kind of a science slacker from the start compared to these 2. I sold out early. It's like, I'm going to work with the public. I'm going to work with the public.
She's really smart.
I'm going to work with the public and try to get something done here.
Yeah.
And so I didn't struggle with it. But I would imagine that you both did, because it's a big deal. I mean, the science realm.
Yes, and Sylvia, you've taken some heat for, you were at NOAA, you were the chief scientist there, and you became increasingly vocal about the need for us to take care of our planet. Did you have to worry about that? Did you balance that? Did you just charge ahead?
This business about crossing the line and when you start engaging the public, and I was given a wake-up call quite by chance after I came out of this 2-week expedition living underwater and the aftermath, which was amazing, ticker tape parade down State Street in Chicago.
Wow.
I, as the leader of the women's team, got to speak to Congress, for heaven's sakes. It was just crazy. I have a book this thick with clippings from all over the world. It was because it was the team of women living underwater. A team of guys would never have made that kind of notice. But I found myself really conflicted because I was up in the ivory tower, and could not easily get out of it. But there's a little book on my shelf that I had just forgotten, more or less. It was by Thomas Huxley, and the title of it is Discourses, Biological and Geological. I mean, like, the hottest thing, a really attractive title. But anyway, I don't know. It was that moment when I pulled it out and I saw the first essay was to the public, to carpenters in Norwich, England. And the title of it was On a Piece of Chalk. And he mesmerized me 100 years after he'd written this thing and spoken to the carpenters in Norwich, England. This piece of chalk taken from the White Cliffs of Dover, he described the history of the North Atlantic Ocean because it was written there and the plankton had settled out, forming the layers of the chalky layers that he read the history. And it's the kind of chalk that the carpenters used to draw a line to put nails in the right, anyway. But what really got me was not just his genius for taking a scientific, story and making it understandable to people who were not scientists. But it was in the introduction to the book where he said, basically you'll take some heat for this. You see, your scientific colleagues will scorn you for speaking to the public, but you must do it. You must do it. You must give back. But what really got to me, and it's just makes everything so simple in terms of the question you're asking. You've got to do your best to tell the truth. Don't exaggerate. The truth is the most exciting, important story of all. Now, you might say something and later find out that what you thought was true is not, and then instead of being all miffed about it because, what I discovered was not really true, you celebrate it because you've gotten closer to the truth. A scientist who's a real inquirer of what's the reality, what's really going on, you just keep at it.
Yeah.
And every new discovery you do. We once thought that the age of the Earth, it keeps getting older based on the evidence that. So it's looking at climate change. Do you believe in climate change or you don't believe in? I don't believe or disbelieve. I just look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. Anybody can do that, and everybody should do that.
Yeah.
Everybody can be, and everybody should be what a scientist is. You observe carefully, and then you report honestly what you see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of embellishments, with laboratories and numbers and calculations and theories, but the basic thing is you observe carefully, you use all the senses you've got, and then you report honestly what you see. Yeah. Whether it's to your learned colleagues or to a 10-year-old kid. That's the whole essence of it.
You're absolutely right. For me, just being someone who didn't grow up in the United States and coming here for university, for South Asian, going into conservation or ocean conservation, would just not have heard of. That just was so foreign at the time. And so that's why I pursued a career in science. So the closest thing I could get to working with animals, and I work with gophers, small, burrowing underground fossorial rodents.
I thought you were kidding.
Yeah, no, really, no, I got a whole PhD on it. But yes, so if they're very cute. But my training, my graduate advisor gave me Caddyshack and said, "Go watch this." It's true. But that was the avenue through which it became acceptable. That field of conservation just wasn't there yet. And when I went back to Sri Lanka and told my grandmother I'd become, I had a PhD, she told her neighbor friend, equally aged, "You are, my grandson is back, he's a doctor now, but not the kind who saves people." So I had to add that. So Julie, so I just want to wrap this with open up to questions because I know folks have a couple questions. So quick question here for you. So we had an interesting conversation with the Honorable George Shultz out there, and he pinged us very quickly on climate change and oceans. What do you think we're missing when us as a general public think about ocean conservation? Because clearly there are lots of things you can do, from getting rid of plastics and banning bags to thinking about what you eat. But what's the thing that you think is being left out of the conversation?
Well, I think there are lots of people and organizations working with different strategies. Certainly they're the policymakers, and the basic problem there is they're spending 99% of their time dealing with terrestrial issues. And then, we thought we were making some progress on climate issues. Hopefully we can keep that moving, but think about the ocean, I mean, what's missing is it's just still missing from the conversation. I mean, we've been able to engage people around saving wildlife, around things that they know about and they can get excited about, and that's great. Certainly, running an aquarium, I see that every day. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, we try to get people to engage with amazing animals and fall in love with them and realize what's worth saving, and then lead them to taking actions on its behalf. But the bigger picture of especially global warming and coral bleaching and ocean acidification is it's really out of sight and out of people's minds. And to be honest, when it comes to climate change, it sort of doesn't matter if we're hooking them because of the ocean or because of flooding or, the solutions are all the same solutions. And so, being a selfish species that we are, actually, we're probably going to, if we ever do anything about it, it'll be to preserve ourselves. But there are a lot of people that have fallen in love with ocean animals as a motivator. Certainly Sylvia's had a big piece of that. And the big thing that has had a huge impact that's kind of surprised me over the past 20 years have been these market-based programs like Seafood Watch and the whole role of business. With climate now, we're speaking earlier.
I think your Seafood Watch, the thing that the Monterey Bay Aquarium does has got, I think, something like 57 million now have been made, right? I mean, it's an extraordinary number.
Yeah, it has a big following, but more importantly, it's not really just about getting people to order the right seafood, and it's to get them to talk about it and to generate the media buzz. So it's in the media enough that the big businesses have come to the table, and then once a couple of them make a move, the others have to make a move, and now 85% of the top retailers have time-bound commitments. The big retailers in the U.S., the Costco's, the Targets, the big players, time-bound commitment to, have more stringent purchasing policies. Now, Sylvia's story, of course, is much more highbrow. It's like quit eating fish, and we get along great on this. We're both working different angles.
Yeah, that's right. There we are.
We're working different angles. I know. I'm kind of. I feel like my strategy working with business, is sort of maybe. I'm kind of the practical, more, don't think of it as a bottom feeding, strategy. It's more just, I don't know, business and markets are running what's going on our planet. And so if we get their attention, that can have a big impact. I mean, the United States, we're the second biggest market for seafood in the world. I mean, we're importing a massive amount of seafood, and we're having a huge impact on the global ocean because of that. And the thing about fishing is we know the answers. We know how to do it right. It's like the most ancient relationship of humans and the ocean. We've been doing it forever, and we know how to do it better. Sadly,
it's the oldest hunter-gatherer relationship we still have left.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, even we in the U.S. would do well to just knock off eating fish, as Sylvia says. Sadly, I mean, something like 1 billion people on the planet, and island nations and coastal nations, depend on it for protein, and aquaculture is growing and all of that. But anyway, that's an area that I've been really engaged with, and it's been really hopeful and interesting, and more business. We've had all these businesses just make a big commitment. The we're still in commitment about climate change. Forget Washington; they're doing nothing. California is fired up, and the business community is fired up. Right.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I want to open it up to questions, and please make it a question. And when you give your remarks, because I can't ask this question right now, I know that this audience are all here because they all want to be amplifiers of our message. And I think one of the things everyone struggles with is how you've spent your life trying to get the message across, and you want everyone here to take that message forward. So do share with us when you make your remarks, how can we do better, okay? Questions, please. Yes, sir. There's a mic right there. So if you could use it, that'd be wonderful.
I have to say, I'm the retired director of the Duke Marine Lab. And I'm glad we had Sylvia. Sorry we didn't have Julie, but that's okay. But having known you guys for a while, I'd like you to come a little bit on what I would call your epiphanies. And what I focus on is, Sylvia, with you, when you conceptualized the Defying Ocean's End meeting in Cabo San Lucas some years ago, and brought in the Goldman Sachs people to cost it out.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I remember that.
How did that epiphany happen, and what did it take to do it? And Julie, with you, having moved with you a little bit in the 70s with the aquarium, where did that idea come from? And what did it take for you to get that done initially?
Great question.
Defying Ocean's End conference with 150 people, 70 organizations, 20 countries. It happened because I was on the board of Conservation International. And Gordon Moore was on the board of Conservation International, and he had helped fund, mostly it was his brainchild, to have a conference at Caltech called Defying Nature's End that was hugely successful. Ed Wilson was one of the key leaders in looking at where are we going with looking at the evidence. I think Ed Wilson would have been perfectly happy as just studying ants for the rest of his life, but as a witness, looking at the evidence, the changes that are taking place, really fostered in him this attitude of, I've got to get out of my shell and do more beyond just looking at my beloved ants. And that's what happened to me with looking at critters in the ocean. I had to do more looking at what was happening. Anyway, so I just, at a board meeting where they're talking about defying nature's end, I said, well, we need to do something like that for the ocean. And just like that, Gordon Moore said, well, if you put it together, I'll fund it. It wasn't quite that simple, but but that was the spark, and we pulled it off. You know, it was
Great name too. I mean, it was a beautifully poetic sort of defying Ocean's End. I mean, what a nice way of.
And we had people work for a year in advance preparing for it. And the idea was, what can we actually do, and what's it going to cost? Can we take perverse subsidies for fishing and turn it around to give fishermen kind of a soft landing to transition to other ways of making a living? Looking at what we don't know about the ocean, the great unknown ocean, it's still that way. Numbers are all over the place, but it's something on the order of only 10% of the ocean has been seen, let alone explored or even mapped with the same degree of accuracy that we have for Jupiter, the moon, Mars, you name the other parts of our solar system that we spend vast amounts of our resources to get to know. And this part of the solar system, this part of the universe, is still mostly a mystery. I mean, even with our own bodies or our backyards with trees, but the soil, but the ocean, especially the ocean. So that's how
the epiphany
how it came to be, and now here it is. Yeah, and then it took another year to take the proceeds. We really worked those 150 individuals, you're one of them, to really try to codify the solutions. And what pains me is we went to all this trouble, but nobody reads the book. Well, few people do. I've read it. And it's wonderful. It's now time to take those projections and say, all right, it was 2002,
right?
2,
Yeah.
3 was when the book, and then it's time that we go back and evaluate where we thought we could be in the next 10 years.
Great idea. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Julie, you're in?
Good idea.
You're in?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's see where
Is
we are.
Gordon
Yeah.
in California, in Hawaii still? We'll call him up.
Right
Gordon,
here.
are you
Let's
out
have
there?
the conference here.
How about you, to his question?
If I understand the question, it was sort of, how did the aquarium happen? Okay, I'll try to make it short. first of all, it was not my idea. And my older sister and her husband and some of their colleagues who were studying at Stanford's Marine Lab originally had the idea in part inspired by the old Hovden Cannery, which Stanford had purchased next door to their marine lab, oldest marine lab on the Pacific Coast. And also, we were all on the board of the Packard Foundation. My parents set up a foundation in the 60s, and the four of us were put on the board in our 20s. You know, we like to get a life sentence, you know. I mean, obviously, it's been a complete privilege and just an amazing opportunity, but we were funding a lot of great work in a lot of fields, but we came to a point where my father at one point, he said, you know, we should do some projects of our own. We're writing checks to all these people and they're wonderful things, but we should do something of our own. And so we all, you know, put this idea together, and my father got really involved with it. So the idea, of course, became much bigger than we imagined. But the basic premise of the idea of the Monterey Bay Aquarium was to really share with the public what had inspired us to study marine biology. And we had all been inspired by this piece of ocean, which is a remarkable piece of ocean right here, a few miles away. But more importantly, because I had studied seaweed and the other founders had studied invertebrate animals, we wanted to tell people what the ocean's really like.
That's right.
That it's not just whales and dolphins. It's not the things you see on TV. It's not the things you've seen in other aquariums, which pretty much is just fish. It's mainly a lot of other stuff. And the other stuff is super cool. And it's part of our whole ecosystem. It makes life exist. You know, the oxygen we breathe, I mean, just the ocean is so critical to our lives, and people just had a very simple view of it. What better place than Monterey Bay to tell that story? So we had this crazy idea, let's do an aquarium on Monterey Bay, about Monterey Bay. And I said, we'll never run out of stories to tell about this place. We definitely haven't, and they'll continue
Just gets
forevermore. You know, but we have extended our message to the global ocean because, you know, all the pieces of the ocean are connected. So we've kind of taken that story, which is a wonderful story of recovery of the bay because of all the protection that everyone's done, you know, Endangered Species Act and California laws and the Marine Life Protection Act and the sea otter recovery and all of that. You know, that's fine, but you know, the ocean at large, and of course these global threats like climate change affects our part of the ocean along with every place else. So
any other
story?
Any other question? Sure. Yes, ma'am.
So Julie used the phrase that the oceans were just not even part of the conversation. So does that give us reason to hope that in the current political climate where we're seeing the minimization or potential for minimization of national parks and other preserves, that the ocean parks and the hope spots may in fact be able to skate under the radar and remain intact?
Sadly, no. I mean, Sylvia's hope spots, which are talking about the global ocean, they are on fire. I mean, they are doing so well. The Marine Protected Area movement globally is picking up incredible steam, thanks to Sylvia and thanks to the NGOs like Conservation International, and thanks to initiatives like the Secretary Kerry's, you know, ocean conferences and the sustainable. Now that we actually have a sustainable development goal, number 14, that's about the ocean. Case in point, that there wasn't one. You know, sustainable planet, and there was nothing about the ocean.
About most of the
Even
planet.
all the other SDGs. When you look at it, like the ocean affects all of them.
Yeah.
Poverty, you know, food security, gender equity, social, you know, I mean, health.
Food security.
Food security. I mean, really, all the other ones. No, Sanjayan's a tropical. You know, you're more a tropical forest. So he's going to be saying, well, I don't know about if I totally say that, but bear with me. We're talking about the ocean here tonight.
Yes. So in 2005, there was only one very large marine protected area, if you want to call it that, very large scale, 100,000 square kilometers bigger, which was the Great Barrier Reef. Today there's over 20, I think it's 22, of which at least half are in the Pacific. And, you know, Papahana Umuokokea was one of the first ones, followed by Pippa, the Phoenix Island Protected Area, and then the whole slew of them have come into being. Unfortunately, the word is, in the Washington Post today, that they're taking a big swipe at the three expansions that were created, frankly, first under President Bush, partly due to your efforts with the First Lady and President Bush, and then expanded under President Obama. So they're going to open it to more fishing, and they're going to cut down its size, according to the Washington Post today.
So we all need to advocate. A lot of the NGOs working on land issues or doing calls to action, but a lot of us on the ocean side, we need to speak out about the ocean too. I know the aquariums had a big call to action.
We'll take one more quick question. Someone has it?
Question?
Yes, sir.
I was just listening to what you were saying, Julie. I'm an architect, and I belong to ICSE. I don't know if you ever heard of that organization. I think you both should talk at ICSE. We have a membership. It's all around the world, and they meet in Las Vegas once a year. And they have guest speakers there. And you have the Targets, you have Starbucks, you have all the retailers, all the major retailers around the world. And they're the ones who are causing this, to be honest. They're the ones who are dictating to everyone here in this room how to buy, what to buy, how to eat. I mean, everyone's there. And for both of you guys to come out there, especially you, Sylvia, because we have guest speakers all the time. We had Bill Clinton there. We have, they have all these other people that come in there.
Sure. So let me ask you that. What about engaging with corporations and companies? I know you've spoken in front of them. Tell me about the importance or how you see that.
Thank you.
Well, I don't see what the economy here and the environment over here. I see it like this. You have to work together. It's not one or the other, for heaven's sakes. We all have to breathe. And a sound economy is critical if people are going to be well fed, a place to live, and be inspired to take care of the place. Poverty leads to a degraded environment, and a degraded environment leads to poverty. So it's the distribution of wealth is one of the big problems of today. It's not a new problem, but it's more obvious perhaps with 7 billion people than when there were merely 1 billion back in 1800. So the solutions are with smart people, with every person. Every person has at least a voice and a choice. And it's critical that we use what we've got, the power of taking whatever knowledge you have. If everybody in this room just wrote a letter or made a call or took some action to object to the unraveling of the monuments that every president since President Theodore Roosevelt has used the power of the Antiquities Act to designate some action. And President Bush did more than any predecessor, and then Obama upped the ante. But every president, for the historical, the cultural, and the natural values of the country, using the power of the presidency to take action on behalf of all of us. So why isn't everybody objecting? Why aren't we standing up with our individual voices and saying, no? Damn it.
Right.
Because, we can't let them, one president, take away what all preceding ones back to the early part of the 20th century have given, have put in the bank. It's our legacy. And they want to unwind it, unravel it, destroy it. So it's just a thought.
Absolutely.
Maybe right here in this room, we could start to change it. It hasn't been done yet. And maybe Trump could do another flip-flop in the positive direction and say, you know what? I'm really powerful. And I think it's a good idea to, never mind.
You can say anything you like. You know, one of the things that Julie and I were talking about just earlier today is that, you did see when the White House took this pause on thinking about the Paris Climate Agreement, you had 900 companies, as diverse as Tiffany's and Walmart and Starbucks and Disney, all saying we're still in it. And I think that was an amazing moment when all of a sudden the environmental movement all of a sudden was completely aligned with business. And I think we've all been waiting for it for a long time. Look, to keep on time with the program, I want you to please thank Julie Packard and Dr. Sylvia Earle.
Okay. All right. That was fun. Of course. Okay.
And then we'll bring you back on stage in a minute.
Okay.
You're coming off the stage now. Okay, now on with the awards. So it's my great pleasure to now introduce the Chancellor of UC Santa Cruz, Professor George Blumenthal, who's an astrophysicist by training. He's been a chancellor for, I would imagine, at least a decade, because I have met you a couple times before. And he really has been pushing hard on this incredible campaign that UC Santa Cruz has been on, $335 million and counting, completely important for the university, for science, for communicating science, for oceans. So give him a warm welcome, and please welcome Chancellor George Blumenthal to the stage.
Thank you so much. Hello, and isn't this a wonderful evening? I want to thank you, Sanjayan, for that very nice introduction and for moderating our discussion today. And I particularly want to thank you, Sylvia and Julie, for having done such a great job. There is no topic more important to our future than the oceans. And this was an exciting and delightful conversation. So as I say, I can't think of a more timely topic than what they discussed tonight. A topic more worthy of deep dialogue than climate change, our oceans, and the need for inclusivity in the conservation movement. Think about where we've been over the last few weeks. Hurricane Harvey, the wettest tropical hurricane to ever make landfall in the United States. Hurricane Irma, one of the most powerful Atlantic hurricanes on record in history. And monsoon rains in South Asia, the worst in decades, that have killed more than 1,300 people and forced more than 40 million people from their homes. These are historic storms with catastrophic impacts in our world. And we wish a full and fast recovery for the regions so thoroughly upended, Southeast Asia, Texas, the Caribbean, and the Florida Keys. At the same time, we must acknowledge that evacuating millions of people and hoping for the best is neither an effective, sustainable, nor responsible response to climate change. Leaning into the science is the route we must follow. It's people like Sylvia Earle who are helping to lead the way in this arena. Now, we are here tonight to award our UC Santa Cruz Foundation Medal. Our campus founders instilled in us a willingness, an eagerness even, to go beyond the norm in our academic endeavors, to defy convention in the pursuit of a better way. And that spirit guides us in all that we do today. Our faculty, our students, and our alumni ask questions and push margins. They push boundaries. They think independently and they think creatively. They work collaboratively to break through gridlock and actually solve problems. and we admire those who do likewise. The UC Santa Cruz Foundation Medal recognizes individuals of great distinction and achievement whose contributions reflect our campus's vision and ideals. And tonight, I have the great honor of bestowing this year's medal on Sylvia Earle. At the expense of perhaps being a bit repetitive from her earlier introduction, let me say a few words about Sylvia. She is, of course, an oceanographer, an author, and an explorer. In short, a trailblazer. To name just a few of her accomplishments, she was the first female chief scientist of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Sylvia has been a National Geographic Society Explorer in Residence since 1998. She's also a winner of the Society's Hubbard Medal for distinction in exploration, discovery, and in research. And that puts her in the company of some very distinguished people, historic aviators Charles and Anne Morrow Lindbergh, of the famed polar explorers, of the great anthropologists Louis and Mary Leakey, and of the world's first space travelers, of environmentalists like Jane Goodall, to just name a few. In 1998, Sylvia was named by Time magazine as its first hero of the planet. And as you saw earlier, she adorns the cover of the most recent Time magazine, as she was named one of the women who are changing the world. She has founded 2 marine engineering companies that design, build, and operate equipment that allows for deep ocean exploration. And Sylvia is president and chair of Mission Blue, an organization that advocates for legal protection and conservation in our world's oceans. She is called her deepness by the New Yorker and the New York Times. And with good reason. She has led more than 100 underseas expeditions and has spent more than 7,000 hours underwater, the equivalent of nearly 300 days. That's almost a year. To help me present the Foundation Medal, I'd like to bring to the stage Alec Webster. Alec is the chair of the UC Santa Cruz Foundation. He's also a trustee of the Helen and Will Webster Foundation, which has been a great friend to the university, partnering with us on many important projects, among them the renovation of our historic hay barn and the naming of Rachel Carson College. Please join me in welcoming Alec Webster.
Thank you, George, and it's a great honor to be here with Sylvia Earle and our distinguished panel. And, you know, the challenges that we're facing as a world today are huge, but when you listen to our panel talk and you listen to the questions in the audience, you have to feel inspired. You know, there is hope. And in fact, that's really what we have is hope. And so that we need to move forward with. And George mentioned Rachel Carson College. And Rachel Carson, well, everybody knows she wrote Silent Spring and talked about pesticides and got people motivated and, you know, was an advocate and made people actually step up and do something finally. She was really an ocean person. She spent most of her time writing and communicating about the coastal and tidal areas. And unlike Sylvia, Rachel Carson, as I understand it, actually went scuba diving one time in her whole life and held on to the ladder. What she really did was she communicated. And this is what Sylvia does, what Julie and Sanjayan are talking about. They're communicating their passion science, but so everybody can understand it. And if you can understand it, then you can make a difference, you can do something about it. And because of this communication and passion, the UC Santa Cruz Foundation recognizes that there is no more deserving recipient of the foundation medal than Sylvia Earle. And thank you for doing everything that you've done. Rachel Carson changed the world. She made people finally aware of a problem and to take action. And Sylvia is changing the world as well by making people look at the ocean, telling them about it with passion and with science, and letting them make their decision, but to take action. That's what she asked you here a few minutes ago, and that's what she's asked people to do for many, many years. So I guess with that, I'm going to ask George to help me present the foundation medal to Sylvia Earle.
This is the medal. Sylvia, let me invite you to say a few words now. I just want to say about the medal. The medal is very special. It's constructed, it is a somewhat unusual medal, and as you may have noticed, it has a rock on the bottom which comes from the campus, and the glass within the medal, it was actually taken from the ears that were cut off the mirrors that became part of the Keck telescope in Hawaii. So, Sylvia.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, one and all. This institution is just a wellspring of creativity and, most importantly, I think, caring. One, knowing, does lead to the other. You can know and not care, but you can't care if you don't know. And this place is all about knowing. And I love the association. Go banana slugs. Woo-hoo! So proud to be part of the action. You know, I get asked by kids quite a lot, what can I do? The world is in trouble. I'm just one human being, and it looks really discouraging. Wars, poverty, you know, all the politics, it is overwhelming. But I just say what I really believe, that never before has it been a better time to be a kid of any age. The younger the better, but never before could we know what is now knowable. When Rachel Carson wrote The Sea Around Us 10 years before Silent Spring, no one had been to the moon. No one had been to the deepest part of the sea. No one knew that continents move around. People had dreamed and thought about it, but the evidence for the shifting of the continents, owing to the plates, we just didn't know. We hadn't made the explorations in the ocean that gave us that insight. And the age of the Earth in the sea around us was thought to be about 2 billion years. Now we're estimating 4.5 billion years or so. so much. We didn't know about microbes. We thought at the time that bacteria in the ocean were relatively rare. Oh my gosh. We didn't even know about our own microbiome. We knew there were bacteria living in parts of us, but nothing like the revelation about how important microbes are to everything that we do, including breathing. So, armed with knowledge, there is reason for hope, but not if we just sit on that knowledge. It's knowing and then doing something with what we've got. We still have a chance, a really good chance, to take the world as battered and transformed as it has been through the actions of our species. Never so much as during my lifetime. Really, the 20th century has been hard on planet Earth. We actually took more whales in the 20th century than during all preceding time of humans taking whales. And we've certainly taken more fish, mostly since the middle of the 20th century up to the present time, so that we're looking at a 90% slide of sharks, of tunas, of swordfish, of cod, of groupers, of snappers, of rockfish, you name it. If it's on your plate, it's likely to be at a historically low level from what it was in the middle of the 20th century. So we're all witnesses to this. We can learn about it with new ways of communicating that didn't exist. Nobody had a cell phone in the 1950s or in the 60s or the 70s. We are blessed with the capacity to link. We worry about 7 billion mouths, but it's the 7 billion minds that are cause for hope. That if we really use the power that we have of learning, knowing, and seeing ourselves in perspective, it's there for us to act on. Where will we be by 2050? Or where will we be at the end of this century? What we choose to do, and it is a choice. You make choices all the time. And sometimes the choice is to do nothing, but that's a choice. It will make all the difference, not just in the next 10 years. It will influence the next 10,000 years, what we do right now. Because the changes are happening so fast. We can change in a positive direction, or we can choose business as usual and eat the last tuna, take the last squid, and have a great time in doing so. But the future, those who are now kids will look back and say, "You knew, why didn't you do something?" Or they'll say, "Thank you, oh, thank you for standing up to those who would take away the protection we have with national monuments and national parks, the protection of the air we breathe, the water we drink, the creatures who share the planet with us." Now, I'm probably talking to a room full of people who become accustomed to eating what many refer to as seafood. I think of it as sea life. I don't think of a fish necessarily as food. I mean, mosquitoes probably look at us and think, food. But I have come, in part because of Julie's institution and others that have preceded it, to look at fish differently, to look at squid differently, to look at shrimp and you name it, life in the sea. There are fellow citizens on this planet. And I come to understand that the most important thing that we take from the ocean is our existence. We live because the ocean lives. We have the oxygen cycle that functions in our favor because of life in the sea. The nitrogen cycle, the carbon cycle, all these things are driven largely by life in the ocean. Of course, the water is key to life, but water alone doesn't make planet Earth function. It's life in the ocean that governs the planetary chemistry. And so, now we know. I mean, at least the knowledge is there. It's acting on that knowledge. And if not everybody knows, clearly not everybody knows. But the fact that the knowledge exists and that we have communication that exists in ways that did not exist even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. The thing is to use our power. Just occurred to me while we were out having drinks before we came inside, this new iPhone, face recognition. Every one of us is an individual, and it's dignified now by, you can't open your iPhone unless it's you. And the 7 billion of us now, each of us is recognizable. I mean, if a fish came swimming through the room and they'd say, oh, they all look alike, you know. Just as when we look at a school of fish, we say, oh, they all look alike, or a flock of birds, they look alike. But going to the aquarium, I've challenged people in the Monterey Aquarium to come with me, come look at where you have the mackerel. No two are exactly alike. Their spots are different, the lines are different, their faces are different. So, like Jane Goodall, who had a habit of naming her animals, her animals, her friends, her associates, the chimpanzees, each one got a name, and some of her fellow scientists really gave her a hard time. You're popularizing your science. You're demeaning. You just give them numbers. Just think of them as, those fellow primates, if you will. I challenge you to look at life around you with new eyes. Just use the knowledge that is out there. Get to know the individual trees in your backyard. Line up 500 leaves, you'll see that no leaf is exactly the same as any other leaf either. It's the diversity of life is infinite, but so is the common ground we all share. Whether we're talking microbes or whales, the chemistry of life has a lot in common. We have a lot of fellow creatures out there on whom we are dependent for our existence. Here's the thing. They are now dependent on what we choose to do. Bacteria will exist no matter what we do or don't do. But a world that is as rich as we now know it should be our legacy. We should try to hang on to the diversity of life, the places that we know that are still in pretty good shape. And many of them are in national parks or in the hands of people who care, who privately take action to protect their backyard or large areas if they can. But it's up to all of us to take care of the earth. What we do or fail to do will make all of the difference. So this is the time, and I'm just so glad to be here with you, fellow banana slugs. And I thank you deeply for honoring me with this amazing sculpture. It's not a medal that you would hang around your neck, but it's a medal that I will treasure. Thank you.
You're closing remarks now. You're doing closing now.
And invite people to dessert.
Dessert and coffee.
Thank you all for coming out tonight and for helping us honor Sylvia Earle. And thank you also for your support for UC Santa Cruz and the great work that we do. Thank you to Julie Packard and the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is as fine an institution that translates science into action as I've ever seen. Thank you for supporting conservation and the conservation of oceans and science and helping be our ambassadors for our planet. Now, we get to go out and have a conversation out there and have dessert and coffee. And if anyone finds my notes, I still want them back. So thank you and good night.